don't like it. I'm not happy about it because I appreciate her and what she has meant to me, what she has meant to the show, what she has meant to the network, what she's meant to the business.
Stephen A. Smith didn't just sit back when Molly Qerim stormed out of ESPN. He went straight to the top. Reports say he confronted the network's executives face-to-face, demanding that they give her the respect and the paycheck she deserved. But this wasn't just about Molly. It pulled back the curtain on how ESPN really treats its stars behind closed doors. What started as a sudden walkout turned into a full-blown power struggle, and the truth behind it is a lot darker than anyone expected. When Molly Qerim, the longtime face of First Take, suddenly disappeared from the set, fans thought it was just another TV shakeup, but insiders claim it was far from routine. Stephen A., the biggest personality on the network, wasn't just reacting to her exit. He was allegedly confronting the higher-ups, calling them out over unfair treatment, pay gaps, and the constant pressure female talent face in the sports media world. What we've learned paints a wild picture of chaos, favoritism, and quiet power plays happening in ESPN's shiny hallways. Stephen A. supposedly risked his own standing, his multi-million-dollar contract and superstar reputation to stand up for Molly in a way few could have predicted. That's not a small move for someone who's built his empire inside the very system he was challenging. This wasn't just a TV breakup, it was a corporate showdown. According to Stephen A. himself, Molly didn't have a farewell tour, a highlight reel, or a tearful send-off. Nope. She walked out cold. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. And when someone in that world leaves that fast, it usually means one thing. Something behind the scenes went really bad.
Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is a friend. Molly is a co-worker. Molly is somebody that I have leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to me. We've been partners on the show for the last 10 years. And a lot of times, some of these things happen, and it's just uncomfortable to see.
Now here's the kicker. The same Stephen A. Smith who pulls in around $20 million a year from ESPN started dropping cryptic comments that, let's be honest, sounded way too personal to ignore. People started asking, was he sending a message to the bosses or maybe defending someone the network wanted forgotten? Whatever it was, things just got very real. Stephen A. Smith kept insisting, I'm not talking about Molly. But come on, everyone could see through that. In one breath, he denied mentioning her, and in the next, he was preaching about value, leverage, and knowing your worth. Those were the exact battles Molly Qerim was rumored to be fighting with ESPN.
We don't get to define our own value. We don't get to define our own worth. We don't get to sit there and summarily say, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. And guess what? I don't give a damn what anybody say unless you have the leverage to do it.
That's not coincidence, that's code. Let's be real, Stephen A. was absolutely talking about Molly, and the message wasn't just for her, it was a shot at ESPN's top brass. The timing was too perfect to ignore. Right when stories started leaking that Molly had been offered a $2 million a year deal from one of ESPN's rival networks, Stephen A. suddenly went on air ranting about how people can't just demand money without leverage. That wasn't random talk. That was pressure. And if anyone has the power to shake the room at ESPN, it's Stephen A. He's the golden goose, the highest paid voice in sports television, the man bringing in ratings and headlines every single day. If he says, pay Molly what she's worth, the bosses have to at least hear him out. But instead of quietly protecting her, what did he do? He went on live TV and told the world she abruptly resigned. That single line set off a wildfire online.
The details, quite frankly, are none of y'all business. But it's not as if I know all the details. It was a contract negotiation that was going on. ESPN certainly did not want to lose her. But in the end, she made a decision to walk away from the show effective immediately. As you see from her Instagram post, her Instagram story last night, to be blunt, it came as a shock. I was not aware that this is something that she was contemplating doing. But in the end, she made her decision. And we have to move on as a show.
Suddenly, every viewer wanted answers, and every gossip site was digging for clues. Why did that hit so hard? Because if this was just a boring contract dispute, why would Molly walk out immediately? Why not finish the season? Why not do a farewell show? None of it added up, and YouTube analysts started connecting dots fast. Behind the scenes, insiders claim Molly had been negotiating for fair pay. ESPN reportedly offered her way less than she believed she earned, especially compared to stars like Malika Andrews and Mina Kimes.
When you pay Stephen A. Smith $20 million, that means, okay, well, whoever his co-host is, they're going to want an exorbitant amount of money. And so she may have been making $2.5, $3 million as the host. Well, when Stephen A. is sitting there making 20, well, maybe now she wants to make 10.
On the flip side, Stephen A., who always bragged about fighting for his colleagues' contracts, started changing his tone. Suddenly, he was talking about how we all answer to somebody. Fans couldn't help but ask, was he really standing with Molly or standing with the bosses? According to whispers from inside ESPN, tension between Stephen A. and Molly had been brewing for months. It wasn't personal beef, it was business friction. Both knew their worth, both understood leverage, and both knew who had real power. And when the network allegedly offered Molly what many insiders called a disrespectful deal, things reportedly snapped. One commentator broke it down perfectly. That's the elephant in the room. Stephen A. sets the money standard at ESPN. If he's getting $20 million, of course his co-hosts are going to ask for more. But ESPN's budget wasn't built for that, and the network didn't want to open those floodgates. That financial tension might have been the final push that drove Molly out the door. Now here's where it gets messy. Stephen A. tried to frame her exit as purely her personal choice, saying it was her story to tell. But the timing looked suspicious. Just weeks earlier, he was proudly taking credit for helping Shannon Sharpe land his ESPN deal, even bragging about it publicly. So why didn't he do the same for Molly? Why didn't he go to bat for her the way he did for everyone else? Maybe, just maybe, the bosses told him to back off. Or worse, maybe they reminded him exactly who signs those $20 million checks. Or maybe, just maybe, Stephen A. Smith wasn't ready to risk his own leverage for Molly Qerim, and that's what makes this whole saga so explosive. For once, the mask slipped. The king of sports talk, the loudest voice on ESPN, suddenly found himself trapped between two worlds: loyalty to his co-host and loyalty to the empire that made him rich. When the dust settled, the outcome was brutal. Molly was out, Stephen A. stayed in, and the bosses walked away smiling. But here's where the twist hits. By going on air and turning Molly's exit into a whole sermon about contracts and leverage, Stephen A. might have accidentally revealed more than he meant to. Let's think about it. When a guy like him says, we all answer to somebody, what's he really admitting? He's saying he tried to step in and failed. That's huge. Because if Stephen A. Smith, the $20 million face of ESPN, couldn't get Molly Qerim a fair deal, then what does that say about ESPN's real priorities? It says the bosses protect profits first, and the people who built their brand second. That's the part they never wanted you to hear. Behind all the polished studio lights and rehearsed banner, this was a cold corporate chess game. Stephen A. might have stood up for Molly in the boardroom, but in the end, the suits upstairs reminded him who really calls the shots. And that's where the story turns from drama to betrayal. Because when Molly walked out, it wasn't just an employee quitting, it was a statement. A ripple that turned into a tidal wave through ESPN's power structure. And the craziest irony of all, the one man who could have stopped it, Stephen A. Smith, ended up being the lightning rod for the entire backlash. Let's not forget who Molly was to First Take. For over a decade, she wasn't just a moderator, she was the balance. The calm in the middle of the chaos. She kept Stephen A.'s fire from burning the set down and kept Max Kellerman's logic in check when debates got too wild. Molly was the glue that kept that show from collapsing. She didn't just host, she orchestrated the rhythm that made First Take work. Yet when her contract came up, ESPN treated her like she was just another name on a spreadsheet. No farewell, no montage, no send-off, nothing. Her departure leaked online before she even had the chance to tell her side. And when fans looked to Stephen A. for clarity, what did he do? He went on air and made it sound like she just quit. No emotion, no defense, just a cold handoff of responsibility.
But when you have negotiations and you're talking with people and you're going back and forth and you're hearing things that you may not want to hear or feeling things you may not want to feel, even though you're valued, even though people acknowledge those kind of things, we live in a world where we have to grow up.
That wasn't just commentary, that was a lecture, and fans caught it instantly. The internet exploded with outrage, saying Stephen A. wasn't protecting Molly. He was protecting ESPN's image. That stung, because this is the same man who's built his entire persona on telling it like it is. He calls out players, coaches, execs, nobody's safe. But when it came to Molly, his tone shifted. Suddenly, everything was vague. No names, no direct shots, just that careful phrase again. We all answer to somebody. Why the sudden silence? Because insiders say Stephen A. had already gone to war behind the scenes. Multiple analysts believe he did confront the higher-ups, Bob Iger, Jimmy Pitaro, and the rest of the suits. Allegedly, when ESPN offered Molly what some insiders called a lowball deal, Stephen A. tried to use his influence to boost her pay. But here's the cold truth. ESPN didn't flinch. The executives reportedly told him to stay in his lane, that business decisions weren't up for debate, not even from their biggest star. So in the end, Stephen A. learned what every insider eventually learns at ESPN. No one, no matter how loud or famous, is bigger than the brand. And that's what makes this story so wild. Because behind all the ratings, the fame, and the studio smiles, there's a chilling reminder that loyalty in this business comes second to power. And Molly Qerim's exit proved that better than anything else. By the time the drama hit full swing, ESPN had already locked Stephen A. Smith into that monster $20 million contract. And to the network's executives, that made the choice simple. Stephen A. was the brand. Molly Qerim, in their eyes, she wasn't the ratings machine. She wasn't the headline grabber. She was the moderator. And in cold corporate language, that meant expendable. That's what left Stephen A. stuck in the middle. Either he pushed harder for Molly and risked his own leverage, or he stayed quiet and played ball with the company that made him a superstar. And judging from how things looked on air, he chose the second option. But that's where things cut deep, because Molly wasn't just some co-worker. Stephen A. himself called her his partner, his ally, his support system.
Molly is a friend. Molly is a co-worker. Molly is somebody that I have leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to me. We've been partners on the show for the last 10 years. And a lot of times some of these things happen and it's just uncomfortable to see.
If that's really true, then fans have one burning question. Why didn't he use that $20 million power to protect her future? Podcasters, YouTubers, and analysts tore him apart for it. One commentator said it perfectly. Don't chase clicks at the cost of the person who helped build your empire. And yet, Stephen A. kept going. He doubled down, publicly insisting, Molly's story isn't mine to tell, all while dropping just enough hints to stir up chaos. Classic Stephen A. Protect your image, keep the drama alive, and let the headlines do the heavy lifting. But beneath the surface, Molly's fight wasn't just about money, it was about respect. Sources close to her described the ESPN negotiations as insulting and disrespectful. Reports said she was lowballed, while others, like Malika Andrews and Mina Kimes, were cashing in big checks. Imagine how that must have felt for someone who helped carry First Take for nearly a decade. Molly was there through everything, the Max Kellerman years, the viral debates, the endless shakeups. She helped define the tone of the show. Yet when it came time to recognize her worth, ESPN treated her like a replaceable extra. That wasn't just business, it was a slap in the face. And then came the dagger. Almost overnight, ESPN's rivals started circling like sharks. Fox Sports, Amazon Prime, even whispers from Netflix's upcoming sports division, all offering Molly multi-year deals worth millions. Everyone in the industry saw her value, except the very network she helped make number one. That's why her exit wasn't calm, it was immediate. She didn't stroll out, she ran. Because staying would have meant accepting less money, less respect, and living in the shadow of a co-host earning 10 times her salary. Now let's talk about Stephen A's so-called confrontation. Insiders claim he did try to step in. He reportedly went to the top, reminded the bosses of Molly's worth, even warned them about the bad optics if she left. But when they refused to budge, he folded. Just like that. And that's where fans started comparing him to Charles Barkley. Barkley has taken pay cuts before just to keep his crew together on Inside the NBA. He knows that chemistry is the product. That's why his show feels like family. But Stephen A., he doesn't seem willing to give up a single dollar to keep his team whole. When he says, "We all answer to somebody," what he's really saying is, "I tried, but I wasn't risking my $20 million check for anyone." And that right there, that's the heartbreak of this whole saga. Because don't forget, Molly didn't even want to leave. She later posted that she was disappointed the news broke early, that she never planned to exit that way. But who was the first to tell the world she'd resigned? Stephen A. Smith. Whether he meant to or not, he became the face of her exit, the guy announcing his own co-host's downfall on live television. That's the bitter irony here. The man who always preaches loyalty, who constantly reminds others to fight for your people, is now being accused of letting one of his closest allies down. Fans are divided. Some say Stephen A. did what he had to do to protect his own bag, while others think ESPN's corporate machine was just too ruthless to fight. Either way, this isn't just a story about Molly versus ESPN. It's a mirror reflecting how corporate America really works. Loyalty doesn't pay the bills. Numbers do. Even the most loyal, long-serving talent can be chewed up and replaced the second they stop fitting the budget. And in Molly's case, that cruel truth came crashing down the moment she walked out of that building. For good. The fact that Stephen A. Smith, the loudest, boldest voice in sports, went quiet when it mattered most. That's why fans are calling this one of the biggest betrayals in ESPN history. But trust me, the story doesn't stop here, because the real bombshell about Stephen A.'s showdown with ESPN's owners hasn't even dropped yet. And when you hear it, you'll understand why Molly Qerim's exit might just mark the beginning of the end for ESPN's empire. Let's start with the contract that lit the fuse. Molly wasn't asking for the moon. She just wanted respect and a fair number. But ESPN treated her like a replaceable piece, while Stephen A., their $20 million man, was caught in the middle. He might be their biggest star, but he doesn't own the network. And when her contract dispute turned into a full-on resignation shockwave, he had to make a brutal choice: fight the bosses or play loyal soldier. From what insiders say, Stephen A. tried to do both, and it blew up in his face. After Molly's sudden resignation, ESPN thought they could quietly bury the story. They figured Molly would walk away, Stephen A. would keep First Take rolling, and within a week the headlines would fade. But that's not what happened at all. Instead, Stephen A. went on air and started talking nonstop about contracts, leverage, and bosses.
We live in a world where we have to grow up. And again, I'm not talking about Molly here, but I'm watching, and I've been watching over the last several years, people in this business fall by the wayside because we forget that all of us ultimately answer to people. We don't get to define our own value. We don't get to define our own worth.
That wasn't just a casual rant. That was Stephen A. venting his own frustration on live TV. Without saying it outright, he was basically telling viewers, "Yeah, I fought for Molly, but at the end of the day, I don't sign the checks." And that's when everything spiraled, because fans didn't see a man standing up for his co-host. They saw a man throwing her under the bus. Clips of Stephen A.'s comments spread across YouTube like wildfire. Analysts called his remarks tone-deaf, defensive, and even self-serving. Others accused him of gaslighting the audience, making it seem like Molly was ungrateful or greedy for asking for more. And then came the leaks. Almost immediately after Molly's exit, reports started flooding out, saying ESPN had offered her far less than she expected, while rival networks like Fox and Amazon were dangling multi-million-dollar deals. One outlet even claimed she was in talks for a $2 million per year contract elsewhere, way higher than ESPN's so-called lowball offer. So when Stephen A. said on air, "We don't get to define our own value," fans took it as confirmation that ESPN did shortchange Molly. And instead of defending her, he sided with the suits. Social media exploded with outrage, calling him out for being all talk about fairness until it came time to back up his words. But behind the scenes, the truth may have been messier than it looked. According to insiders, Stephen A. did confront ESPN's executives directly. He reportedly went to them with numbers. reminding them that Molly had given the network a decade of loyalty, that she'd helped First Take dominate ratings, and that she deserved better. But the execs didn't budge. To them, moderators were interchangeable. They had backup options lined up before Molly's chair was even cold. That left Stephen A. stuck in a no-win situation. If he pushed harder, he risked his bosses turning on him and potentially jeopardizing his own $20 million empire. But if he stayed silent, he looked like a hypocrite. The man who talks about standing up for people, but didn't actually stand up when it counted. So he tried to walk a dangerous tightrope. Publicly, he praised Molly, calling her talented, professional, and vital to the show. Privately, he pushed management to reconsider, but not hard enough to risk his own standing. And in the end, nobody walked away happy. Molly felt betrayed, fans felt Stephen A. sold out, and ESPN's executives, they were furious that he'd even brought up contracts on air, turning an internal issue into a national spectacle. That's when the damage control began. Stephen A. started giving soft interviews, making statements about his love and appreciation for Molly, trying to clean up the narrative.
I don't like it, not happy about it, because I appreciate her and what she has meant to me, what she has meant to the show, what she has meant to the network, what she's meant to the business. And I'm gonna miss her.
But by then, the internet had already made up its mind. His attempt to protect his brand had made him look like the villain in the very story he helped create. And the craziest part? There's still one more secret about this confrontation. Something ESPN really doesn't want getting out. Because if it's true, this wasn't just a co-worker dispute. It was the start of a quiet rebellion inside the network itself. But that didn't fix the optics. Not even close. If anything, it made things worse, because here was Stephen A. Smith openly admitting that Molly Qerim was the heart and soul of First Take, while still letting her walk right out the door. Fans weren't fooled for a second. They saw the contradiction loud and clear. Across social media, podcasts, and fan forums, the narrative flipped overnight. Stephen A. wasn't the hero anymore. He was the villain. One YouTube analyst said it bluntly, "If you really wanted her there, you'd have taken a pay cut. Take $1 million from your check and give it to Molly. That's how you show loyalty." That hit hard because it highlighted what legends like Charles Barkley and the Inside the NBA crew have been doing for years, sacrificing their own bag to keep their family together. But Stephen A., he suddenly looked like the guy guarding his $20 million deal at all costs. And then came the wildest twist yet. Rumors started swirling that maybe Molly didn't just leave because of ESPN's lowball offer. Maybe she left to get away from Stephen A. himself. Commentators began whispering about friction that went deeper than money. One outlet even asked outright, did Molly Qerim leave ESPN to get away from Stephen A. Smith? Now let's be clear, there's no solid proof of any personal conflict, but the timing, it raised plenty of eyebrows. Just days before Molly's shocking exit, Stephen A. was bragging on air about helping Shannon Sharpe land his ESPN contract, talking about how he fought for him, how he made it happen. But when it came to Molly, silence. No public defense, no praise, nothing. And to her, that silence must have felt like betrayal. Behind the scenes, that's when things reportedly got tense. Sources claim Stephen A. actually went to the top brass, using his star power to demand Molly get paid more. He supposedly told them she'd been loyal for years, that she was vital to First Take's success. But the execs weren't hearing it. They allegedly shut him down with a cold response. "We pay you $20 million. That's where the money goes. Everyone else falls in line." That's the harsh truth about corporate media. No matter how powerful you are, there's always someone above you pulling the strings. Stephen A. might be ESPN's biggest name, but Bob Iger and Jimmy Pitaro are the ones holding the real power. And when push came to shove, they made it crystal clear. Molly wasn't worth the investment in their eyes. So when Stephen A. went back on air saying, "We all answer to somebody," that wasn't just a random thought, it was a confession. He'd gone into the boardroom swinging, tried to flex his influence, and got shut down. That's why this entire saga hit so hard, because it showed that even the loudest man in sports couldn't outtalk the corporate machine. This wasn't just about a co-host leaving a show. It was a reminder of how cold the entertainment industry can be. When even Stephen A. Smith learns that his voice only carries so far, that says everything about how ESPN operates behind the curtain. The fallout has been brutal. Molly's offers from rival networks prove her true value. Fox, Amazon, and even Netflix reportedly throwing money her way. Meanwhile, Stephen A's once bulletproof reputation has taken a hit, with fans questioning his loyalty and calling him out for protecting his check instead of his colleague. And ESPN, they're looking like a soulless corporation that doesn't care about loyalty, just protecting his bottom line. But the most shocking part of all this, it hasn't even fully come out yet. Insiders claim Stephen A made off-camera comments, private remarks that hint his frustration with ESPN's leadership has reached a boiling point. People close to the situation say those comments could flip the entire narrative upside down once they surface. Because if what's being whispered is true, Stephen A's relationship with ESPN might be hanging by a thread. This isn't just about Molly Qerim walking out. It's about an internal war between the network's biggest star and the executives trying to keep him in check. And make no mistake, that clash didn't just shake First Take, it rattled the entire sports media world. The show may still air every morning, but behind the cameras, the tension is thicker than ever. One empire is cracking, and the person standing at the center of it all is Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith is now facing questions he's never had to answer before. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Stephen A. built his whole empire on being untouchable. He's the loudest man in the room, the face of ESPN, the guy who never hesitates to call out players, coaches, or executives on live TV. But when it came to protecting his own co-host, someone he publicly called his partner and friend, the mask finally slipped. Fans started asking the question he's always dodged. Was Stephen A. really the loyal leader he claimed to be? Or just another corporate player protecting his own bag while everyone else took the hit? And then came the twist that made it all sting even more. Molly Qerim's rebound was instant. Within days of her resignation, major networks were lining up with offers. Fox Sports, Amazon Prime Video, even whispers of Netflix stepping into the sports talk game. All of them wanted Molly. Why? Because while ESPN treated her like a replaceable part, the rest of the industry saw her true value, a proven, experienced on-air talent with credibility, poise, and a loyal fan base that had been riding with her for years. One insider report claimed that Molly was being courted with a $2 million per year deal, nearly double what ESPN had allegedly offered her during those messy, disrespectful negotiations. That revelation made ESPN look terrible to the public. Suddenly, the network that once defined sports media looked like it was crumbling, losing star talent not because people wanted to go, but because management refused to pay them what they deserved. And then there was Stephen A., standing right in the middle of the storm, his role more confusing than ever. On one hand, he kept praising Molly in interviews and on-air moments, calling her one of the best in the business and saying First Take wouldn't be the same without her.
I appreciate her and what she has meant to me, what she has meant to the show, what she has meant to the network, what she's meant to the business. And I'm gonna miss her.
But those words hit different now because they came from the same man who had the leverage to make a difference and chose to play it safe instead. Fans couldn't ignore the contrast. People started comparing him again to Charles Barkley and the Inside the NBA crew at TNT. That squad has always prioritized chemistry over cash, even restructuring deals just to keep the family together. Barkley himself has taken pay cuts to protect the team dynamic. Meanwhile, Stephen A., the $20 million man, couldn't or wouldn't close the pay gap for his co-host of 10 years. And the irony was brutal. Just before all this went down, Stephen A. had proudly told the world about how he personally helped Shannon Sharpe land his ESPN deal, bragging that he fought for his guy. But when Molly needed that same backup, he suddenly became the company spokesman saying, "We all answer to somebody." That shift wasn't just disappointing, it felt like a betrayal. Fans all over YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter started saying the quiet part out loud. Maybe Molly didn't just leave over money. Maybe she left because she didn't want to sit next to someone who talked about loyalty, but didn't live it, and the whispers kept growing louder. Insiders started leaking that the tension between Stephen A. and Molly had been building for months before her exit. Some said it was over contracts. Others hinted it was creative control. Who got the final say on show segments, who got more screen time. A few even said it came down to personality clashes behind the scenes. Whatever it was, one thing's clear. The chemistry that once made First Take unstoppable had started to crack. By the time the camera stopped rolling, Molly had already made up her mind. She was done. and Stephen A. was left standing alone, forced to explain himself to millions of viewers who weren't buying the act anymore. His brand had always been about dominance and confidence, but this time, his silence spoke volumes. But here's the part ESPN didn't want the public to see. Stephen A. didn't just roll over quietly. According to multiple insiders, he did go into those executive meetings swinging, fighting for Molly's raise, arguing her importance, trying to leverage his star power to make something happen. But the result, he lost.
How do I make my bosses more money? How do I get some of it? I'm going to repeat that. How do I get my bosses more money? How do I get some of it? Why do I say that? Because every one of us answer to somebody.
The network bigwigs, people like Bob Iger and Jimmy Pitaro, made it crystal clear that Stephen A. might be their most famous face, but he wasn't calling the shots. They reminded him that ESPN signs his checks, not the other way around. That's the cold truth that even Stephen A. had to face, and the same truth that's now threatening to shatter the image he's built for years. Because now, the question hanging over his head is simple. When the next crisis hits, will Stephen A. fight for his people again or protect his empire? Think about that on-air rant for a second. That wasn't just some random talk. That was Stephen A. Smith admitting he tried to play hardball, only for ESPN's top bosses to remind him who really runs the show. No matter how powerful he gets, no matter how loud his voice is, at the end of the day, he still answers to them. And that's what makes this story so explosive. Because if ESPN can tell their biggest, most bankable star no, then what chance does anyone else under contract have? It's a sign that ESPN's empire isn't as bulletproof as it used to be. The cracks are showing, and fast. They're bleeding talent. Not just Molly Qerim, but a long list of hosts, analysts, and commentators who've quietly walked away over the last few years. The network's been cutting salaries, tightening budgets, and gambling everything on a handful of big names. But in doing so, they're alienating the very people who built their brand from the ground up. And fans, oh, they've noticed. The online conversations have completely shifted. It's no longer just, did Molly leave because of Stephen A.? Now it's, is ESPN even sustainable anymore? Rival networks are circling like vultures, ready to snatch up every talented person ESPN disrespects. Fox, Amazon, and even new streaming platforms are capitalizing on ESPN's mistakes, building their rosters, while the sports giant clings to outdated corporate structures that value dollars over loyalty. And caught in the center of this storm is Stephen A. Smith, the man who once looked untouchable. His reputation has taken a hit, his image as the loyal leader shattered, and no matter how many times he insists it wasn't about Molly, fans aren't buying it. They saw the body language, they heard his lectures, and they connected the dots. So where does this leave Molly Qerim? Ironically, in the strongest position of her entire career. She's fielding offers left and right, exploring new platforms, and proving that her name, her brand, and her credibility are bigger than the chair ESPN tried to chain her to. Every deal she's offered is another reminder that she was never the replaceable moderator they treated her as. But for Stephen A., her departure is a stain he can't wash off. No matter how much success he keeps stacking, this will always hang over him. The moment his co-host of 10 years walked away, and he didn't stop it. And for ESPN, this scandal isn't just about Molly. It's a warning shot. If they're willing to underpay and undervalue someone like her, how long before the rest of their stars start realizing they can do way better elsewhere? How long before the so-called worldwide leader in sports collapses under its own arrogance and outdated playbook? Here's the chilling part. Stephen A.'s big confrontation with the executives wasn't a victory. It was a wake-up call. It proved that even he, the face of the network, the man who moves ratings and drives headlines, can't change the way ESPN operates. And if he can't change it, nobody can. Which means Molly's exit might not be the end of this saga. It might be the beginning of ESPN's slow downfall. Because sources close to the situation say Stephen A. left those private meetings with ESPN's owners more frustrated than ever before. Off camera, he reportedly vented to his inner circle, saying he had never felt so powerless in his entire career. And if that's true, then for the first time ever, Stephen A. Smith, the man who's always controlled every narrative, every headline, every moment, is facing a reality he can't shout his way out of. So ask yourself this: If Stephen A. couldn't protect Molly, can he even protect himself? And when ESPN's empire finally starts to crumble, will he be the last man standing or the next one out the door? If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below. I want to hear what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.